The next morning, all the newcomer witches are lined up before the prince, greeting him with an anxious, "Good morning." The prince tells them to relax, assuring them that he's not big on formalities, so they can call him whatever they call Tilly. He then explains that he won't assign them any work during their first week. They should take the time to get accustomed to the town's environment and explore Border Town as much as they want. He guarantees that no one will mistreat them or kidnap them for being witches. He reassures the nervous ladies that he has already removed the church's influence from the western region, so this place is as free as Slumber Island, a place of freedom for everyone. The prince continues by assuming the newcomers already know the basics of anti-phase and maturity, so he directly explains that there will be basic lessons after dinner, covering reading, writing, mathematics, and natural sciences. Their salary will be 1 golden royal per month, with weekends off and paid vacations. If they have any questions, they can ask Wendy for clarification. Once the administrative details are out of the way, the prince dives into the most exciting part of the meeting. He's eager to see the witch's abilities firsthand, as Tilly's description was a bit vague. He decides to go outside to start the demonstrations. As he stands up from his seat, Sylvie interrupts to add something. She presents a few pieces of paper and explains that Princess Tilly discovered these ancient texts at a ruin site near the bay, and there's also a letter included with them. The prince starts reading the letter and quickly becomes anxious. As we already know, the letter reveals some serious and concerning information related to what Tilly encountered at the ancient ruins near the bay. Once Prince is done reading, Lady Scroll confirms that the text in the letters matches exactly with the book Kara retrieved from the Eastern Forest ruins. This revelation piques everyone's curiosity, including the prince's, who reflects on the details in the letter about the man-made island with unpredictable tides, the ancient telescope, and the stone door on the sheer cliff. He finds these elements incredible and is puzzled by the existence of such strange ruins at the bay. Lady Scroll agrees with Princess Tilly's assessment, pointing out that the ruins were created by the same people, given the consistent scripture and language. She's concerned about why the church would have built these structures, and then abandoned them. Wendy adds that it's not just these ruins that are mysterious. Records older than 450 years have been wiped out. She's baffled about what might be hidden there, or why there's such a concerted effort to erase these historical records. The prince says that since Tilly's already been working on deciphering the texts, he's pretty sure she can crack them. To give her a hand, he'll tell her about the holy city of Tequila and send her some photos of the devils Soraya took, as those might help with the translation. He points out that keeping this info hidden is pointless, and it's better to be prepared and understand what's going on, which might even reveal some weaknesses of the church. Because if the church did not care about these ruins, they'd have buried their history even deeper. He also suggests checking out the stone tower in the misty forest again, where lightning once found a devil. Maybe there are more clues there. He adds that once the armies got their new weapons, they'll clear out the forest just in case there are any other devils hanging around. First up, the prince wants to test everyone's powers. They head out to the empty backyard where Lotus, the first witch, shows what she's got. She pulls a giant boulder out of the earth with ease. The prince is seriously impressed, noting that despite being around the same age as Nightingale, Lotus looks incredibly young, just like a freshly picked cucumber. Her abilities are super strong too. She can terraform within a 5-meter radius without breaking a sweat. But when she tries to stretch the mud tower beyond 7 or 8 meters, the tower she creates starts to collapse due to structural imbalance. Also, she uses less magic if the dirt is looser, but her ability is good for solid ground like the Slumber Island she came from, while the dirt houses she might build in the border town are just going to collapse. Lady Scroll also explains some nerdy details about her power. It's a summoning type, no extra frills, and she can terraform up to 5 meters. The stones of divine judgment hit her hard, but they don't affect anything she's already built. Next up is Honey, who just hit maturity last winter. Her main gig is animal subordination. She can tame any animal and make it follow her commands to the best of its ability. Her control lasts until the animal finishes its task or she dissolves it herself. Plus, she's got this cool extra ability called Animal Messenger, where she can send animals off to find even more powerful ones to tame. The catch is that all her powers are affected by the stones of divine judgment, and the bigger the animal, the more magic it takes to tame it. Then there's Evelyn, who's about 25 or 26. She's got the wild talent of turning crude whiskey into all kinds of different alcohols, as long as she's tasted them before. She might help out with extracting ethanol, but serving a lady booze during the day is no-go. So, the prince will have to wait until dinner to get a taste of her magic. Next up is Sylvie, and the prince feels pretty uneasy around her. She has the power to see through anything within her range, even behind her back and through obstacles. Her vision is totally unobstructed, which is a bit unsettling for him. He's actually a bit envious of her ability. Imagine being able to see through clothes of any woman you want. Sylvie also has an additional ability similar to Nightingale's, where her magic can see accumulated and dissipate. Following Sylvie is Candle, who reached maturity during the last few months. Before, her powers were limited to candle lanterns, but now they're amplified. She can maintain a state of matter for a period of time. For example, if she casts her magic on an ice cube, it won't melt, even if you put it under the sun. Her power is enchanting in nature and requires direct contact with the target. The prince had a grand idea of using Candle's powers to keep molten steel hot forever. However, he soon realized it might be a bit of a stretch, because maintaining that kind of heat would require a ton of magic. The real challenge is how much magic is needed and how long it can be kept up, especially for larger volumes. Nightingale also points out that Candle's magic is pretty good, but her mana capacity is on the lower end of the scale. Still, her talent is a gem. If she can keep something in a stable state, it could seriously boost the durability of machinery made with weaker materials. So Candle's got the potential to make those machines last longer and run smoother. Once he's done examining, Nightingale asks if there are any witches the prince particularly likes. The prince replies that he thinks they're all quite good. Nightingale is shocked to hear that the prince is willing to clap all of them tonight, but he gives her a gentle bonk and explains that he's not trying to light up his night, but simply that their abilities are impressive. The prince then decides it's time to head back to the castle since the testing is over. He mentions that he has something he wants to give Nightingale after dinner. I wonder what it could be. Maybe his rod or something special. It seems like Nightingale is really looking forward to whatever the prince wants to give her tonight. When dinner time arrives, everyone enjoys a grand feast once again. What's most intriguing today is the prince's new invention, and Lightning and Maggie are eagerly anticipating what kind of ice cream or other creation he has come up with. The prince tells them that everyone will find out soon enough, but they should eat first. Nightingale feels a bit disappointed that the surprise isn't just for her, but rather something the prince has prepared for everyone. Meanwhile, the new witches are fascinated by the chopsticks. Lady Scroll explains that the prince often invents new and interesting things like perfumes, chopsticks, and ice cream, and he tests them on a witch before officially manufacturing and marketing them. The new witches fondly recall the luxurious experience of bathing with soap they had a while ago in the castle, a treat typically reserved for nobility. They can hardly believe they're living a life that rivals even that of kings, given all the amenities they're enjoying. As the witches get cozy and start feeling at home, we're skipping ahead to the end of dinner, where the prince finally grabs everyone's attention and decides to reveal what he's made. A few maidens quickly bring out wine, and the prince announces that he's starting with white wine among his inventions. Compared to the Hebrew and fruit wines they've had before, this one is the real deal with a higher alcohol content, so he advises the non-adults to stay away. Lightning protests and insists she wants to try it too, but the prince reassures her that he's also prepared something lighter, which can be enjoyed with a bit of extra ice. He presents all of the types of wines in front of Sister Evelyn, and mentions that he's heard she's been to cocktail pubs and breweries before, so he's curious to hear her thoughts. Evelyn quickly agrees, picks up a glass of wine, and takes a gulp. As soon as the wine hits her belly, she feels a slight burn in her throat, but the apple juice helps flush it out. She finds herself pleasantly surprised by the blend of floral and fruity notes in her mouth, which makes it a unique taste she's never experienced before. Next, she tries the second cup. This one has a mix of milk and honey or sugar, creating a sweetness that complements the wine perfectly. It's a match made in heaven, and she thoroughly enjoys it. Then, she moves on to the last cup. This one's pure white wine, no extras. It's got a fiery kick that rolls over her tongue and down her throat, leaving a tart zing that lingers. It's intense, but in a good way. After the tasting, Evelyn happily declares that all three wines are unforgettable. She admits that while some might not appreciate the strong flavors, true connoisseurs will definitely appreciate its richness. The prince is pleased with her feedback and explains that this was just a sample of his strongest white wine. He's planning to deepen its flavor even more and will need her to taste it again later. The next batch of maids arrives with boxes, and these gifts are only meant for adult witches. Anna receives her own box, while Nana eagerly wonders what's inside. As promised, Nightingale also gets a box, but she doesn't seem too thrilled. The prince tells them to open the boxes once they're back in their rooms. Once the witches are in their rooms, the younger witches start complaining. They feel that the prince is playing favorites and didn't bother giving them any gifts. But Lightning reminds Lily that the prince specifically said the gifts were only for the adult witches. Lily, however, remains as arrogant as ever, brushing off the reminder. While the young witches argue among themselves, Wendy starts opening her box. As soon as she lifts the lid, all the witches crowd around to see what's inside. Turns out, the prince wasn't joking about the gifts being for adults. Inside the box are bras, clearly meant for ladies with saggy hooters. The younger witches start fiddling with the bra, having no clue what the hell this thing even is. Maggie comments on how the bras seem like an incredibly large pair of goggles, while Lightning is skeptical, wondering how exactly these are supposed to be used. That's when Wendy spots a letter in the box. She opens it and starts reading it with her eyes closed. Meanwhile, Lady Moon is enjoying the soft, smooth texture of the bra, while Lightning and Maggie are still trying to figure out what's going on. It seems like the older witches have finally understood what the bras are for, and they're pretty embarrassed by the letter. It explains that bras help redistribute the weight of breasts, improve circulation, and enhance posture. The younger witches look at their own flat chests and then at Wendy, who is sporting the largest melons ever. Even the usually arrogant Lily starts to understand why the gifts were only meant for adults. But she tries to save face, claiming she doesn't care about the bras and never did. It's clear, though, that Lily's just trying to cover up her embarrassment about not having a pair of her own. Lightning tells Wendy to take hers off because she wants to try it too. But Wendy gets flustered and quickly pushes all the younger witches out, telling them to go to sleep. She closes the door behind them, her heart still racing, and wonders why the prince gave them something like this. Nightingale confusingly questions why the prince didn't just give the bras collectively. But then, realization strikes her like a thunderbolt out of the blue. Maybe the prince gave them individually because each bra is a different size, meaning he actually paid attention to everyone's measurements. Realizing this, Nightingale bolts out of the room and rushes to Anna's room. There, she asks her about the gift. Anna proudly shows off her chest and says the bra is surprisingly comfortable, and she's already worn it and finds it quite convenient. She then offers to show Nightingale the bra, but Nightingale quickly turns her gaze away, saying she doesn't want to see. Instead, she asks if Anna thinks it's weird for the prince to give them something like this. Anna points out that the prince plans to sell these bras to the public, so he's just testing them on the witches first. The conversation shifts to discussing how the bras fit and their comfort, so we'll skip over that part. In the next scene, we see the ship sailing. Inside, the prince is speaking with Sister Lotus, asking her to raise dirt on both sides of the river to lay the foundation for a bridge. They dive into some nerdy physics and science talk, and in the end, the prince asks if she can raise the dirt over 10 meters, given the river's depth. Lotus confidently agrees, saying she'll handle it. Meanwhile, Wendy is steering the boat with her wind powers and is pleasantly surprised that her shoulders no longer hurt, thanks to the bra. She's eager to thank the prince personally for the thoughtful gift. Once they reach the perfect spot, the prince tells Wendy to stop the boat. He then instructs his fellow engineer that they need to dig a pit around the dirt that Lotus is going to pull out, and they'll fill it with concrete. The prince specifies that the pit should be no more than 5 meters in diameter and 1 meter deep. Once it's filled, the witch will lower the depth by 1 meter. If they repeat this process, they'll be able to build a concrete wall that extends down to the riverbed. Lotus uses her earth control to raise the pile of mud, and as soon as she commands it, the mud begins to pop up and stack quickly. The prince is surprised to find it easier to raise dirt through water than through sand. However, the stinky smell that follows is unbearable. He quickly deduces that the pile is composed of decomposed plants and animals, along with the waste of villagers who've relieved themselves near the river. He decides to have some people shovel the mess away. They'll need to clean it up and add layers one by one to shape it properly. The prince laments that if transportation weren't such a primary issue, he would have used the decomposing trash as fertilizer. Speaking of fertilizer, the scene shifts to a vibrant field of crops, bursting with grain. We meet a guy in a cap, known as Sirius, who admires the impressive yield. The seeds have doubled in quantity, and the grains are bigger than ever, all thanks to the witch's hard work. Sirius reflects on how, ever since the prince held the ceremony and Nana appeared on stage, the witches stopped hiding themselves. It's clear that only witches can raise soil in the middle of the river. Suddenly, two people rush up to Sirius, and it looks like he is not thrilled to see these guys here, because he's pretty sure they're about to ask the same old questions. As expected, they ask if it's true that they can become free citizens, own their own houses, go to school, and they will only need to turn in 70% of their harvest. They also fire off a bunch of other questions about their new opportunities and rights. Sirius casually points to the banner that says, "Labor creates wealth and labor changes fate." He smiles and says this means if they put in the effort, they'll become free citizens just as the prince promised. And trust him, that promise is solid. When someone asks what they should do with the remaining 30% of the harvest, to which Sirius explains that you can either sell it to the prince, eat it yourself, or use it as seeds. And that's pretty much it. He goes on to explain that Bordertown doesn't allow private sales of harvest. If they try to sell it outside the official channels, they'll be breaking the law, and their harvest could be taken away with a side of punishment. But then, one of the commoners raises concern that they might get scammed by the prince. Sirius reassures them that this won't happen. The prince follows market prices, so there won't be drastic changes. The public marketplace, managed by the city hall, is the only place where grain is sold. The prince will always buy at the market rate. With that, Sirius concludes the conversation and tells them to get back to work. Another guy pipes up and asks Sirius if he knows where Miss May and Miss Eileen went, since there haven't been any stage shows recently. He's worried they might be sick. Sirius reassures them that they'll return in the fall because they can't perform in this scorching heat. Or can they? As the workers head off to their tasks, Sirius reflects on his own journey. He used to be a knight, trying to escape his father's fields, but got captured and stripped of his position in just a few months. Somehow he ended up at Bordertown. His salary is going up, there's plenty of room for advancement, and he's even come to look forward to the harvest. In the next scene, the farmers have finished harvesting all the grain and have even started burning the leftover straw. After a while, the bald advisor, who is absolutely thrilled, reports to the prince that this season's harvest is enormous. He explains that, according to the city hall's estimates, their exports are 4 times higher than before, and their best field has produced 6 times more than its previous yield. This gives them more than enough to feed all their villagers. The prince smiles at the good news, pleased to know their warehouses won't be empty anymore. The bald advisor adds that with additional workers and more farmers, they could easily support 50 to 60,000 people. This makes the old man even more turned on, as he dreams about their town growing into a city and then expanding across the entire continent. You see, in this world, city growth is pretty much limited by food supply. A big city like the capital, with 20,000 people, needs tons of surrounding villages to keep everyone fed. But with new machines our boy just produced, one person's work can now feed 10,000 people, and the big harvests in Bordertown are all thanks to Sister Leaf's improved grain. We further learn that the prince has cut back on the number of farmers without lowering the output, which means he can now focus on manufacturing. Since the agricultural team has nailed down the best farming strategies using metal tools and machines, their exports are only going to get better. In the next scene, the prince then steps up on a pedestal and gets the crowd pumped up. He knows they're dying to hear some good news, so he tells them straight up, the city hall will handle turning everyone into free citizens. You can choose to keep farming or try something else in town. Once the harvest wraps up, they'll announce the details about citizenship promotions. The crowd goes wild with cheers and praise for their prince. The prince further goes on to announce that starting next year, they'll only need to meet a quota to gain citizenship, making competition unnecessary. Basically, if you work hard, you can shed your identity as an indentured worker. As he said before, hard work creates wealth and labor changes your destiny. He hopes for a day when Bordertown is free of indentured workers and everyone is a free citizen. The whole crowd erupts in excitement, swinging their praises for the prince. The scene then shifts to somewhere unknown, where we see Timothy, a wannabe king, after a long time. He's lounging in an office room, reclining back in his chair and bizarrely sniffing the wooden table. By the smell, Timothy can tell the table is made of cerulean wood. He's surprised to find that her sister still prefers materials from Blizzard Peak, which means his sister definitely not feminine at all. A creepy smile spreads across his face, which soon turns into maniacal laughter as he gloats about having outdone his sister, Garcia. Timothy reveals that in just half a month, he's methodically taken over the Sand Nation people she left in Clearwater Port. He's confident that she's lost her grip on the southern region, and he's feeling pretty smug, knowing that the Queen of Clearwater is now history and the southern region is back under his control. Just as Timothy is savoring his triumph, one of his knights barges in. Timothy tells him he'll be heading back to the capital the next morning. The knight will handle everyone else, except for Timothy's personal guards and the capital's night squad. He instructs his knight, who goes by the name Duke Edward Haas, to keep the southern region secure and to prevent the Sand Nation from stepping into Grey Castle territory. Edward Haas asks if this means he'll be staying behind. Timothy agrees, saying there's still a lot to finish here, and he needs someone loyal and powerful to stay behind, either to deal with traitors or gather refugees. He reassures Edward not to worry. He won't be stuck here forever. Once everything in Clearwater Port is sorted, he'll make sure to bring Edward back to the capital. He explains that Grey Castle still needs to be unified, and before conquering the western region, he'll need many knights to fight. So he promises his loyal friend that he won't leave him behind. Edward looks down, saddened, and reminds Timothy that his brother Raymond Haas is missing. He asks why there's been no news about him, especially since it's been 2 months since Raymond went to the western region. Timothy reassures him that Raymond might be delayed by something, or he could be on his way back. He tells Edward not to worry about his brother for now. The focus should be on burning down Garcia's old stronghold. Timothy wants everyone in the southern region to see that Garcia's old base will be nothing but ashes. Even if she returns, it will be in ruins. He instructs Edward to just burn the soldiers who survived the church's pill's side effects. Once Timothy is alone, he reflects on how Bordertown has easily handled the demon threats, defeated Duke Ryan, and captured Longsong Fortress. He's confused by how his one of the dumbest siblings is doing all this. Not only that, Rayman and his 1/500 soldiers who were deployed to the west have also completely lost contact. He's convinced that something significant must have happened in Bordertown to cause such a drastic change in his brother. Whatever the case, Timothy is determined to make his brother, Roland Wimbledon, beg for forgiveness at his feet eventually.